Northwest Public Radio, KRFA.
Things on the door. Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, November 20th, 2017, and this is the Moscow City Council meeting. If you would all please rise with me, I will lead in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first point of order for us today is confirmation of appointment of oath of office of Brandy Sullivan to the vacant city council seat position. Lori, our city clerk, will administer this.
Do we need to vote first?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay, well, go ahead and stand right up there, Brandy, because we're going to vote you in, so don't worry about things.
Prior
No,
to
this
that.
is an
I know
appointment.
this is an appointment. Right.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve the appointment of Brandy Sullivan to the vacant seat previously occupied by John Weber for the remainder of his term.
Second.
Okay, motion by Jim and second by Walter to approve Brandy for this vacated seat, and I'll start to roll with Gina.
Aye.
Aye.
And I.
Okay, now you can carry on and you are confirmed at this end, Brandy.
And raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I, Brandy Sullivan,
I, Brandy Sullivan,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of council member in the City of Moscow,
of council member in the City of Moscow,
Latah County, Idaho, according to the best of my ability.
Latah County, Idaho, according to the best of my ability.
Over there now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll give her a second to get herself positioned.
I'm ready to go.
Welcome, Brandy.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 2, which is a consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the consent agenda as is listed. I'll start to roll. Walter?
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
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 Okay. And we will move on to item number 3, staff recognition report. Gary Riedner, sir, you've got the podium.
Thank you, sir. I would like to introduce Les McDonald, who has a presentation to make.
Mayor Lambert, members of the council. It gives me great pleasure to be here this evening to introduce to you to an individual who I think has done some tremendous things here within the city of Moscow. You know, one of the things that I have had the great pleasure of seeing over the years, I've been here over 14 years now, and to me, one of the greatest pleasures I guess I've had in those times has been watching the increased professionalism of the staff as a whole, and in particular for my interest in the Public Works Department. We've, over the years, seen a lot of transitions from, if you will, the old guard staff that was here for many, many years. They retired. Some of them have moved on. And we brought in new members into our community, into our team. And I think we have been extremely successful in bringing in very professional individuals. One of the things I guess I see as a measure related to that is how those individuals, excuse me, how those individuals are viewed within the state of Idaho and within the institutions in which we operate. When we start seeing recognition of our staff members as people that are noted throughout the state or in some cases the United States or even internationally, and recognized as individuals that have something worthwhile to say and it's worthwhile to contribute to those institutions of which they're a part. To me, that brings a lot of satisfaction for the City of Moscow, for our team, for what we do, and recognition for the city, but also for those individuals and what they do. So tonight I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Mr. Michael Parker. He is our water utility manager. Mike's been with us now for a few years and has changed roles a little bit as he has gone on. The item before you this evening is recognition for him and an appointment that he has received. And I want to take a minute and read to you actually a section of the state code that pertains to this appointment. This has to do in Title 54, Professions, Vocations, and Businesses under Chapter 24, related to the Drinking Water and Wastewater Professionals Licensing Act. And I'll read a portion of this for you, but it says, in order to safeguard the environment and protect the public health and establish the minimum competency requirements of persons whose duties are identified in this chapter, there is hereby established in the Department of Self-Governing Agencies a Board of Drinking Water and Wastewater Professionals for drinking water and wastewater operators and backflow assembly testers, hereinafter called the Board. It goes on to say that the Board shall consist of 7 members. 2 drinking water system operators, 2 wastewater system operators, 1 backflow assembly tester, 1 resident of the state of Idaho who is a member of the public with an interest in the rights of consumers in water and wastewater services, and 1 who shall be the director of the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality or the director's designated agent. The members of the board are appointed by the governor of the state of Idaho. The governor has selected our very own Michael Parker to be on that board. He was appointed earlier this summer to the Board of Drinking Water and Wastewater Professionals. His term commenced on July 17th of this year and will expire on April 23rd of 2020. It is a 3-year term. Duties of the board and the role that Mike will fulfill include being responsible for all applications for operators within the state of Idaho. And this includes nearly 100 applications every 3 months that they will be reviewing. And that's expected to increase as a lot of the older operators are aging out and retiring, new operators are coming into the system and need to become licensed. The board also issues reprimands and revokes licenses for noncompliance with the rules or failure to receive appropriate annual training. So training is a very important aspect of what is done for operators. The board reviews training applications to make sure they meet the requirements for the training processes and the appropriate licenses, and works with the legislature on laws pertaining to testing, reciprocity, and disciplinary actions. So as you can probably tell, it's a pretty important role that this board carries to make sure that the folks that are running our utility systems today are doing it in a manner that is very safe and provides us the water quality that we need in a manner that's consistent with the desire and safety of our communities. And so it gives me great pleasure to ask Mike to come up and join me so that I can present to him his certificate of appointment from the governor to the Board of Drinking Water and Wastewater Professionals.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mark.
Thank you, Les. Mayor, Council, I am very humbled by this and the governor's letter that he sent me. I'm very humbled to be here in front of you, receiving the recognition as an operator. Over the 20-some-odd years I've been in the business, worked hard, tried to just excel in this career field and teach young operators. And I've enjoyed it. I found a career that I actually love. It's not a job. It's something I enjoy doing. I come to work about an hour and a half early because I enjoy it, and I stay about an hour late. So I put a lot of time in, but like I said, it's something that I enjoy doing. It's a hobby almost. So I'm humbled. Thank you.
Well, Mike, I will say this, and I'm sure I can reference all the counselors up here, but as the mayor of Moscow, I'm extremely proud of you and extremely proud of our water department for the safe, clean water that we have for all of our citizens and have had for decades. And you are an excellent example of a professional that we have working within our city. And I'm just very, very proud of you. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's give this guy a round of applause.
Come up. We want to shake hands with you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
No. Well done, man. As always.
Thank you, Mike.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Gary, any other staff recognition?
We have none at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, with that, I'll move on to item number 4, which is mayor appointments. And I had 3 names that I want to submit in front of council this evening. We've got Bruce Pittman for the Human Rights Commission, expiration at 12/31/2019. Kirsten Miller, Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, expiration 12/31/2018. And Sophia Eck, Human Rights Commission. She's a college voting seat for this year that ends 12/31/2017. And I would entertain a motion from council to approve these 3.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to approve all the appointments listed.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim and a second by Gina to approve the 3 slated names for these commissions. I'll start to roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay. Well, any of you folks out there, I did not see Bruce. Do we have anybody else that is?
Here.
I guess not. I always like to give everybody a chance. Their commissions are extremely important to us here in Moscow. And I love for folks not only to get the recognition, but get a chance to say hi to us and tell us what's on their minds. So, but none of them are here this evening, so we'll move on to item number 5, which is the public comment and mayor's response period. We limit this to a 15-minute time limit. And we request that anything that is on the agenda tonight not be discussed, and anything before a Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. Outside of that, you are welcome to come up, state your name, and your address, and we'll give you 3 minutes to listen to your concerns. Well, with that, we'll move right on. Thank you very much. Item number 6, second annual Cops and Robbers Run donation to the Moscow chapter of the Fraternal Order of Police. And I've got Kalisha here. Kalisha Owens. How are you, Kalisha?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thank you for having me. On October 28th, we held the second annual Cops and Robbers Fun Run. The run consisted of a 5K and 10K along the Bill Chipman Palouse Trail, starting and ending at Gormley Park. Costco donated water, Safeway donated bakery items, and Jimmy John's donated sandwiches for all the finishers. We had more runners than last year, and each received a long-sleeve T-shirt. And we're pleased to donate $1,020 to the Fraternal Order of Police, Palouse Lodge, number 149. Officer Sieverding is here to tell you more about the Fraternal Order of Police and accept the check.
Hello, Mayor, City Council. I'm Joe Sieverding. I'm our newly elected Palouse Lodge President. A brief history about the Fraternal Order of Police. It was formed in 1915 to address the working and safety concerns of law enforcement across the country. Today, the FOP has grown to become the world's largest voice of law enforcement. We are 325,000 strong. A local history. In 2010, local law enforcement officers came together and formed the Palouse Lodge 149, dedicated to honor the fallen officer Lee Newbill, badge number 149. It is our mission to unite law enforcement officers, their families, and the community we serve. The goals of the FOP include supporting public safety through community involvement and education, fostering relationships between citizens and law enforcement, partnering with citizens groups to strengthen our community through communication and collaboration. On behalf of the Palouse Lodge 149, I would like to thank the City Council and the City of Moscow for your support. And we would also like to give a special thanks to Kalisa Owens with the Parks and Rec Department for organizing the Cops and Robbers Run. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get a picture of this, Gary.
Will you join us now?
Absolutely.
Big check.
Do I get to be in the middle?
One more time. Perfect.
So a lot of the money we raise through different events like this, we give back to the community, as well as we like to support fallen officer families. One of the most recent, Sergeant Greg Moore, a Coeur d'Alene officer, was killed in the line of duty, and we made a contribution to him, to his family. As of recent, we had a county deputy who actually suffered a stroke, is still recovering, so we're going to be helping him out. Another event we had this summer, we did a Police vs. Fire softball game, and it was a benefit to Alternatives to Violence to the Palouse, so all the proceeds went to that. So what the FOP is about is giving back to the community, helping other officers out in need, and that's what we're about.
Okay, Officer Joe, one of the reasons I wanted the officer to explain that to ladies and gentlemen, I knew a number of these different things, but what this fraternal order does do is it's a betterment of our community, and of course we really appreciate our law enforcement, Officer Joe. So thank you very much for the commitment and the work that you folks do.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kalisha, for setting up that help the run. Okay, we will move on to Citizens Commission report, Tree Commission report. David Schott is here this evening. Hello, David.
Good evening, Mayor Lambert, members of council. It's my pleasure tonight to come and introduce Clark Phillip. He's our vice chair of the Moscow Tree Commission. I'm the staff liaison to the Tree Commission, and I've just note on a personal note, it's been a really good group this year, a good group of commissioners, and it's been a lot of fun. So with that, I'll turn this over to Clark Phillip for our presentation.
Good evening, Clark.
Evening, Mayor Lambert. Thank you, David. Mayor Lambert, members of the council, appreciate your time and the opportunity to present our annual report this evening.
Clark, could I have you move the microphone up a little
Absolutely.
higher? Thank you very much.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right. Just to give you an overview of the mission statement of the Tree Commission, Cliff Notes, we plan to establish and help conduct community forestry for the city of Moscow. Well, our membership on the Tree Commission currently sits at 6 out of the 7 seats currently filled. We have Art Betke, he's absent here tonight, but he is our City Council liaison to the Commission. And David Schott, of course, is the Assistant Parks and Rec Director and City Staff Liaison to the Commission. And I'd just like to plug, if I could at this time, that anyone with a passion for community and trees is encouraged to apply for the vacant seat. And an appointment can be found on the City Commission page. All right, so the Commission views the community forest as part of the infrastructure as a whole of the city. The benefits include removal and filtration of air pollutants, of course, out of the air. If you remember those horrible days that we had, all that smoke this past summer, of course. The walled-in effect of tall trees and just trees along the public right-of-way helps to slow and calm traffic for those utilizing active and alternative transportation. Trees help with stormwater and storm mitigation, acting as windbreaks, providing shade, reducing the heat island effect, and it even qualifies under Public Works Wisescape turf removal rebate program. It helps slow water, it armors our wetlands and riparian areas, it helps treat parking lot stormwater runoff with our tree islands and proposed tree islands. Adds property values and enhances the downtown experience at our food establishments, our farmers market, also in our parks, our nursery businesses throughout the city and in the surrounding region, and hopefully those Christmas lights keep on twinkling downtown. And just as it helps the public and their public health benefits, it also helps attract wildlife in terms of songbirds, beneficial insects, and of course, I'm sure as we'll see on the blotter here shortly, those moose that just like to hang around town all winter. The Tree Commission has proposed the following clips of the city's comprehensive plan. We propose continuing efforts to diversify the community forests for resilience to weather extremes aggravated by climate change and emerging disease and pest threats from a warmer climate. The cooling, energy reduction benefits from it, of the heat island, comes in form of revising street and parking lot design, guidelines to increase shade on the paved surfaces and reduce the heat island effect, and increase the lifetime of the pavement by reducing surface temperatures. Increasing the total number of trees as a net of planting plus removal, and also development of a system of monitoring enforcement of existing ordinances concerning removal and replanting by homeowners. I'd like to see that downtown trees, especially in the downtown district specifically, have a plan developed for managing the aging downtown trees to keep shade and attract consumers to help patronize the downtown businesses. Replacement options, of course, should consider this harsh downtown environment. All the above promotes active transportation. I myself rode here tonight. I couldn't see many of the trees, but I'd like to think they were there to help. Of course, we want to promote trees, but there will also be shade where it's not wanted in terms of promoting passive solar electricity and heat generation. So we'll have to maintain the conflicts that arise with that. And finally, we want to develop new and manage existing and appropriately located public sites where edible trees and polycultures allow citizens to harvest and gather food to help increase locally grown food and reduce carbon emissions as a result of trucking in food and produce. The Commission's public outreach consisted of several programs this past year. The Arbor Day proclamation given by the mayor, and also the Tree City USA award was presented, and also the children helped plant a swamp white oak at the Egan Youth Center. We operated and staffed 3 farmers market booths where seedlings were distributed. We hawked about our literature and our street tree planting guide. And we also distributed a citizen questionnaire to help determine what the public wants to see in terms of downtown tree replacement. These were some of our classes that were offered this year, the pome and stone fruit pruning classes being the most popular and best attended. And just offering a plug again to watch out for your Parks and Rec catalog for trees and workshops in the future. Other issues considered by the Commission was the revision of the ordinance, the street tree planting. This will most likely be seen most publicly with the proposed Sonic Drive-In at the Rose Hours parking lot. You'll see contrasted, hopefully, trees planted amongst a vast parking lot without any trees and a lot of pavement. The planting dedication fund has been deliberated upon with the city attorney and approved so that the existing or the unused funds can be used to plant trees in spots where trees have died and or in the subdivision parks. be on the lookout for a revised street tree planting guide that will hopefully be published early next year. We'll have a finalized draft for the commission for our December meeting. And just some other loose ends, we worked with Avista several times this year in collaboration. Travoy Linear Parkway with the tree trimming of their distribution lines, and also we're looking at ways to assist citizens with tree removal and replacement, it being a costly endeavor to remove trees inside the city. Other efforts that we keep considering that have come up with the public and that we've considered within the commission, of course, creating the food forest, not only within the city, but also possibly at Virgil Phillips Farm, it being not in the city of Moscow, but managed by Parks and Rec. Increasing, of course, and identifying vacant spots within the city where trees can be planted, which may or may not be in relation or go hand in hand with the enforcement of the tree removal ordinance, which, of course, hopefully will involve a robust planting of trees within the city. Again, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to present our annual report. Are there any questions?
Well, Clark, a couple of points. We'll know what kind of winter we have if the moose come down from the mountain like they did last year. It seems like when we get a lot of snow up there, they start wandering down into our city. The Tree Commission really does a great job in managing our forests here within the city, and I, as a mayor, really certainly appreciate that. Do we have questions for Clark from anybody? Catherine?
I just wanted you to talk a little more about the edible forest.
Yes, ma'am. So there have been proposals by Parks and Rec that some of the subdivisions that are required, or some of the parks that are required in subdivisions, they may be appropriate places for planting fruit trees, nut trees, and maybe brambles such as raspberries, as well as a way of just promoting education and increasing food production inside the city. Go ahead.
Does this mean you're going to come forward with recommendations about the particular areas and the particular types? And
Oh, absolutely. We have a working group specifically devoted to this as it gets pushed further, hopefully.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Clark, thank you very much, and thanks for the work that the commission does.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Okay, we will move on to item number 8, which is the annual Hamilton Low Aquatic Center report. Dwight Curtis is going to present the annual report to see how the swimming pool did this year. How you doing, Dwight?
I'll get there eventually here. The icon is hidden. There we go. Voila. Voila twice.
We got a swimming pool.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Typically, this report would come from our recreation supervisor that's in charge of the pool. This year, just timing-wise, with the escape of our previous recreation supervisor and Kalisa Owens, who you saw earlier, her timing was just right. So when everything was just crazy and just kicking off, that's when she started. So a lot of things were already set in stone when she got here, and so still learning Moscow and our processes, I thought it was better for this particular report that I would give this. And so next year, she'll be up here. So anyway, each year we give you a report on how the year went. This year in particular, we had some issues that I thought needed to be discussed a little bit, but overall it was a pretty darn good year. The big splashes of the year, of course, it was hot. It was hot. It was really hot all summer. It was busy down at the pool. Mechanically, the pool operated very well. We were open 77 days. Right at the very beginning, we were closed one day due to the weather. As you can see, we had a lot of people in our swim lessons. Howling at the Hamilton had 321 dogs, and they donated $3,500 toward the Humane Society. 100 youth participated in the youth triathlon, and of course the issues that we actually had to deal with were with the lack of swim diapers or swim diaper use, and some staff training that we need to focus on. And I'll talk about those in a minute. Thought I'd get this one out of the way right up front. You can see our revenues to expense ratios there. Looks pretty good, but there's still a pretty good size subsidy there. And this year we had $1 per hour pay raise for the employees trying to be able to compete with the Washington side. It's very difficult now to get enough employees to operate this pool. And you'll see this again in the, of course, the approved budget for 18. And we're still behind them. But our revenues, we did pretty good because we were open so much. We also had some unusual rental revenues that we received because the U of I pool was down, and so they rented the pool, the lap lanes, in the mornings. So we had the benefit of that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so always nice to show you kind of a history of where the rates have been. Trying to keep it affordable, but as you can see with this, trying to keep up with the the expenses. I mean, we're trying hard to close that gap, but when you raise the salaries, of course, things go up. And I'll also address this a little bit later on as well. So you can see where we're at these last 2 years, and you can see where we're at this coming year. That's about 5%. So attendance this year, these are just kind of fun numbers to see how it went. You can see the colder month in June. You can see how many people. July just exploded, and then in August and September we had fewer. That's typical. Toward the end of the summer, you typically see, I don't know if it's the sports and things like that start up. We get the smoke, things like that. People just sort of start to get a little bit tired. A little more. This is the annual, going back just to 2008. But you can see it typically goes in the high 40,000 attendance rate into the low 50s. This year we went 58,000, and a couple years ago was one of the higher ones at 63. So kind of fun to see how those numbers go.
Was that 63 number the year Pullman's pool was closed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And even at that, even this last year, I'm sure Walter did the same thing. It's fun to cruise the parking lot and see what kind of license plates are out there. And you see a lot of Washington license plates, even when their facilities are up and running.
Sometimes it's close to half.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So our temperatures, no surprise, it was really hot. This, you can see by the year how these kind of pan out. Typically, the 80 to 90 range is where it's highest, but you see in the 90 plus, we had 31 days this year where we were 90 plus, and you look over at the cold days, and you just didn't have them, except the one where we had to close. At least it didn't snow that day. We did have that one year where we closed because it was snowing. Concession sales. It just goes without saying, the more people that you have, the higher the revenues are with that. This year being as hot as it was, the revenues went up, not significantly, but a couple grand. Pool rentals, this is what I mentioned earlier. We had the U of I and the swim clubs renting from us that where typically they would be over at the U of I pool. That pool is open now, so they are back over there. So we likely won't see that again this next year. The scholarships, the Youth Scholarship Fund, you can see a little over $13,500 went toward the scholarships. And you can see the breakdown, season passes for the youth, $9,800. Good use of those funds. The non-residents, we just didn't see that. We have money in that fund for swim lessons for non-residents, and we just didn't get the interest this year. We had the residents, but just not non-residents. It was kind of odd, and I never did figure that one out, why that was when the money was available. So, and then the primary issues that we had that we had down at the pool. A lot of reasons I think fell into this, but we had a problem this year with bathroom in the pool, stool in the pool. Montezuma's Revenge, whatever you want to call it, we had it this year. Now, the numbers there, I mean, that's not really very many, but in today's age of social media, once somebody writes something down, everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and suddenly you've had, 10,000 of these, when in fact there really weren't all that many. But that's still too many. And for each of these, when you see this, I don't mean that literally, when you see these numbers. A solid, what happens is we have to close that pool down, and it's only for 30 minutes, but if you just made the trip, let's say from Lewiston, and you just get in there and they have to close the pool down while we're taking care of this business, they get upset. The opposite, where you might have diarrhea, that's a whole different ballgame. This is where your diseases come in. And we have to close it down for a minimum of 13 hours. So if you just paid your money and we just shut the pool down for the rest of the day, you can see why people would be really upset.
Question for you on that,
Yes, sir.
Dwight. So do we have a callback slip or something for somebody who runs into that?
Well, we just refund their money if they're drop-in. If it's a season pass, there's no refund. They just don't get to swim.
Being you're on this subject, earlier in your presentation you had talked about diaper control. Is this part of that
Just about to hit that right now, yes. So with that, we sort of had the perfect storm this year when it comes to, we had a whole lot of brand new staff and management. We had a lot more high school kids that we, on the lifeguarding staff than we typically have. And it was hot. And when it's really hot, and I got this talking to some doctors, that, you get in the water, you think you're hydrated because you're in the water, or the parents do, and they're really not. I mean, they're not out there drinking that water. They're dehydrating because it's hot. And we have in the past, we've closed the pool for a 10, 15-minute break halfway through the afternoon, requiring them to get out. We basically shut the pool down for 15 minutes, then go get something to drink, eat, cool down a little bit. But when it's hot like that, and this is one of those hot years that we hadn't experienced before and seen the effects of that. So the fact that a lot of them did not have the swim diapers, and we didn't have the, I don't know what you want to call it, I'll just call it the training to actually spot that, and then the enforcement of it, then you have more of these accidents that happen. Kids stay in there longer, they start to get sick. Throwing up falls into the same category as the solid. So you just have issues that happen. So, I mean, we're not blind. We see the problems here, and I've already, Khaleesi's already on top of that. She's already got a draft pamphlet out, educate the heck out of it this coming year, including the education of our staff, requiring people, children under 3 to, they have to wear the swim diaper. We will require it or they can't go in. And we will also have a 10-minute break every hour and a half, I think it is. And at the same time on our loudspeaker, encourage them to drink and all that kind of stuff. And so with that, that would take care of that side of that. And then also on the staff training, one of the weak points that we found was that when you do have an issue where this would be with the soft, where you have to do some extra chlorinating of the pool, manual chlorinating, there are special ways to do that. And all of our staff that deal with this are certified to do this. It's just one of those things. If you're not doing it all the time, you can be certified in anything. You need the practice. And so they've already set up a schedule for this next summer that the park staff these would be people that would be on call or something like that when it happens in the evening or on the weekend, that they fully understand how and have practice. And in this case, the staff member did do it right as far as the chemicals and how much and all that, but they just didn't do it in the right place. And so when you're dealing with chlorine, as safe as you can make it, they still don't deal well with biologics. So a little bit of dirt and chlorine and water is a bad thing. So you want to get it diluted, and so you mix it down at the pool. So we're a little out of sequence with that, but we think overall we were a little weak on that, and we'll already have that fixed. And so I think we've got this in hand, under control for this next year, and I don't think we'll see this again. There's going to be times when you just can't help it. If something just happens with little kids, it just happens. I mean, sometimes adults. It's not always just little kids. But those were the primary issues that we had. It was very stressful on the staff because once this gets ahead of you, you can't catch up to it just because of the social media, whether you physically actually had things under control. We did have the health department out 5 times. One of those was a scheduled check that they always do. The others were, most of them were from parents that panicked or just had an issue with maybe the way that they had to get out of the pool and just didn't like it. So, but in all cases, our books were good. I mean, they had no errors, and so we were in compliance. It was just an unfortunate situation for the patrons. So anyway, in conclusion of my presentation, across the board we saw increases in revenues, but we also had increases in expenses. And of course, all of these we will focus on and try to narrow those gaps as best that we can. We know that we have the need for the education and policy enforcement as this next year comes up. Like I said, Kalisa's right on top of this already. We weren't ready to print yet, so I did not bring you the draft pamphlets that will go out, that everybody that signs up will get one, and as well as in our brochures and things. And we also know that we have that weakness in our specialized training of the staff, and we've already arranged to have that fixed as well. And that is my report.
Okay. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several things. Not having seen this before. Dwight, 79 days in 2016. Did you have it on a slide how that compared to previous years?
Let's see.
The number of days open.
I don't think I've got one that has a whole history of days open. I do have from last.
How's your memory?
Well, we had 2016, for example. We had 79 days, and the days open that can change. That just changes depending on when school's open and all that.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do not have a slide with all those days. Sorry.
Okay, if I may.
Go ahead.
Can you go back to your graph on revenue and expense? Do you know how much of the 358,751 was contributed, came from rather the salary increase?
It was just short, I believe, of 12,000. It was 11,000 something.
So that would have closed your subsidy to 41?
Yes.
Had it not been for that?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's close to what we've had in the last year, I think it was. We also had one purchase of, I forgot the number, but it was like 3,000 or 4,000 that was for some, I think it's the squirt gun jobs. You have to buy those in bulk. We do get our money back out of those as they get sold, but we won't have to purchase those for the next probably 20 years. But.
If I may, your stool in the pool problem.
Yes.
Do you have a large sign at the ticket window or at the entrance about requiring swim diapers on 3 and under, or whatever the rule is?
No.
Should you?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, tell them right up.
Nobody will get in that pool and won't know this coming year.
Okay.
We just didn't realize that we were going to have this problem. It has happened in the past, but nothing to this extent. And like I say, I mean, that really wasn't very many times. It's just the way that it happened, and it exploded on social media.
It's obvious it's very much on your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But they are required,
Yes.
and your staff, if they realize that they don't have them, they talk to the parent.
Yes.
Okay. And then if I may last, back on your scholarship slide, please.
Yes, sir.
On the residents, where were you to budget? Do you know? What do we put in there per year?
For residents, for the Youth Scholarship Fund?
Yeah, we put in an amount.
18,000?
And you only used 13.5.
That was just for this. That did not include other programs.
Okay.
It's
So
just pooled.
where were you to total youth scholarships to budget?
We maxed out. We used all 18,000 overall, and right toward the end.
But it went you didn't run out in the middle of the year.
No, we had about a month and a half left.
Okay. And you're budgeting the same 18 for 2018?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Other questions for Dwayne? Catherine?
Mine has to do with staffing and just in terms of continuity. And you said there's more high schoolers, so if you could just go into that a little more, what you see happening and how you're going to retain people that are already trained.
Well, having just had some training the other day on the ways that the different age groups work, it's always going to be a challenge, I think. They look for the quick buck, and we are way behind Washington. So for an extra, few minutes of getting up in the morning and driving over, they can make, up $3 or $4 an hour more. So that's one thing. But at the same time, we found that, one of the things that we do is if you stay the entire summer, you get 10 cents? 25 cents an hour that you worked bonus. We had people leave a week early. They want to go have fun. So I don't know that money was necessarily everything either. We try to make it fun when they have in-service training and things like that. Make it fun. They give them, I think pizza most of the time, things like that. So high schools probably, I don't know. You just have people that stay and don't. They just find they're young. They're just learning what it means to work. Their interests. Sometimes it's really hard to sit there all day and pay attention, and it is a life-saving position. I think we have typically more of the high school age that are in the concessionaire areas that come back and over, but. So that's one of the challenges that CALISA has is retention. We didn't put as much focus on recruiting out of the university that we had in the past. Eric had some contacts that we just didn't have. But CALISA's already working on recruiting. I don't know if we've had it already, but already going to the career fairs that are coming up, things like that, getting a hold of the different living groups, things like that. Showing them what they can make in the summer. We're also entertaining, just researching this out, not proposing it yet, but possibly even contracting with possibly a teacher or somebody like that that has the summer off but wants to make some money but has a pool management background. That is how we did it in the place that I previously worked in, and that guy had been there years. Just loved hanging around in his swim shorts and Hawaiian shirt and manage the pool. And sometimes when you have that maturity level, you have a better running facility as well. So Kaliso will be spending more time at the pool, being the adult. And some of the managers that we get, I mean, most of them, I think all of them, have all been college age and do fairly well, but sometimes you get them just as they're getting ready to graduate and things like that. So it'll be a recruitment thing.
Just to follow up totals, like how many lifeguards, and then what are their shifts? Just for my
I don't know. You're getting beyond my
Okay.
report here,
Scope.
but I can get you that here
Sure.
if you want it, Kalisa.
Because it always looks like there's many people there. I mean, it looks like a safe facility, and so I appreciate that. And I'm just kind of, I've always been curious at the number.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that's different about an aquatics facility like this, a water park, compared to just a pool, is you have all those little hidden spots. Just like in your car, you've got your blind spots, and so you're required to cover those. And so sometimes it seems like overkill, but it's not. It's definitely not. And so, but number-wise.
You were asking how many are lifeguards are on staff at any given time? 15 for the whole facility, and that does not include our concessions. And they work, depending on schedules, we try to work with schedules to the best of our abilities, but you're looking at like an 11:45 to 7:30, and then cleanup. And then you add some lessons in there, and they're there at 8:15, 8:30 in the morning until noon, or getting off at 4, depending on how the schedule worked with the rest of the staff. So we really need upwards of 65 staff,
Right.
just lifeguards. So.
Thanks.
And they rotate as well throughout the day to keep them,
Fresh.
you can't sit out in the sun for that long and still keep
Brandy
fresh.
had a question.
Sorry.
Brandy?
Other than the increased staffing costs, what do you attribute the other increased expenses to in general?
Well, I mean, every year, just your general things go up. We've got chlorine costs, that goes up every year. I mean, it's just kind of across the board. So, there's, in this particular case, the staffing was the smoking gun, if you might want to call it that. And I don't know exactly when that's going to end, just because of, Washington, I believe, is going up again. So there will be a point, I don't know if money always does it, but we still have to get through the budget process, too. So.
Brandy, we have always subsidized the pool. The question is how much. And this is just a jump this year, but it's not unexpected to subsidize it. We have never, and Dwight can correct me here, we have never attempted to raise fees high enough to have it break even. We know we're subsidizing it. My argument with the pool budgeting for 10 years has been that we used to budget $90,000 subsidy knowing we would never use it. And I didn't think that was right, to pull that kind of money from the public when we weren't going to be spending it. But I do recognize the fact we do have to subsidize it. The fact that it jumped up this year in his comments about wages leads me to one more question, if I may. Is your wage problem across the board, or is it with lifeguards, or is it with non-lifeguards?
Across the board, yeah. It didn't seem to matter. Just, of course, on the life-saving side of it, the lifeguard would be the one that, we just can't live without, so.
Well, okay. You have another one, Brandy?
So then you would expect the same general increase across the board of expenses, but whether or not you have to continue to raise the salaries is still somewhat of an unknown.
Sort of, mostly yes. Of course, Kalisa's on board now, and she'll be evaluating what we do and what we buy and things like that, looking for the best deals. This year, she wasn't here, and we had a non-pool person that did an actually amazing job of getting this thing ready and up and running without really having any experience with any of it. And so during the, if you have a cooler day, you can cut down the number of staff that are out there on the ground, so you save a little bit of bucks there. The hot days, even though you're making more money, you're using more staff. And so it just, the costs just, they kind of skyrocket along with the revenues. And we used to show the graph that, we tracked the revenues to expenses and showed years, and it always tracks the same. You always still have that gap, the subsidy, but it's always going to be a challenge, and we always look for ways to close that gap without jeopardizing service or safety.
You got another question?
The last one had to do with the scholarship. Has that scholarship amount maintained, or has it increased slightly through the years?
For the pool?
Yeah, for the pool, the scholarships that are provided.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay.
I can get that for you, but I don't know off the top of my head. I know we ran out of money about a month and a half early, where I believe since we went to the 18,000 cap, that's the first time we've run out, or at least this, a month and a half or so in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Dwight.
Yeah, thanks, Dwight.
Nice
Thank you.
report.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we will move on to item number 9 now. 3rd Street Bridge Task Order Agreement for Design and Construction Management. Les McDonald. Les, you have the podium, sir.
Almost. Well, thank you, Mayor Lambert, members of the council. We are tonight looking at a design services agreement with Keller Associates out of Meridian, Idaho, as the next step in the 3rd Street Bridge project. If you'll recall, about 2 months ago, we had a presentation here at the council about the project and how it would advance in terms of a selection of a design consultant. We did a request for qualifications process back in September, received those statements of qualifications in October, made a selection in October, early November, and have been negotiating a scope of services since that time. And so it's before you this evening, as was presented to the Public Works Finance Committee last week, is the task order under our general services contract with Keller to perform the design and construction management services for the bridge itself. And I know there have been some questions out there about the scope overall of what's within this task order and whether or not it includes anything else within the corridor. This particular contract is specific to the bridge itself. It includes an assessment of the types of bridges that are available to us for this particular situation. We've talked over the course of time about what kind of bridge might work here. And one of the front runners, if you will, would be a pre-cast concrete arch structure that should be made in a manufacturing plant and then shipped in by truck and then assembled here, similar to what was done by the North Latah County Highway District in Viola a couple of years ago, and of the type that is being constructed as part of the Logos school project this late summer. So that's one of the possibilities. There are other types, whether it's a steel girder bridge, a concrete girder bridge, it could be an aluminum arch. There's different styles. And so far we've done the cost estimating that's resulted in the budget that we have based upon the precast concrete arch. So we'll be looking at that, but some of the things we'll be looking at in the assessment are what's most cost effective, which type of bridge has the least impact on the creek channel, has the least impact on the water levels within the creek when it comes to hydraulic capacity, which one fits best with the vertical elevation components as it relates to tying into the surrounding neighborhood, street, and sidewalk system. So that'll all be part of that. The initial step, if you will, within this task order is assessing which bridges are out there that might work, and then with those kind of considerations, which is the best to pursue in the design. Excuse me. As part of that, there will also be the hydraulic analysis. We're looking at how much water is in the creek during the storm events, what is indeed the water level during the 1,500-year storm events, and for whichever bridge type we select, making sure that we're not having a detrimental effect upon those water levels during those storm events. So that's part of the task order, as well as that hydraulic analysis. The substructure design, which is the foundation of the bridge, if you will. If it's a precast, that foundation design is typically done through the precast companies. If it is a different type where it's maybe a pier and a concrete girder, then that would be done through our consultant. So that substructure usually includes the foundation itself, the arch, wing walls, things of that nature. Then the contract also includes the design of the superstructure, which is the street section itself, the sidewalk system, curbs, the rails for the keeping vehicles on the bridge, handrails, the approaches, on and off of the structure itself. That's the superstructure. So that's part of this as well. And then, that actual approach system design. So those are the things within this task order, this design services and construction administration project. It does not include anything on the corridor itself. We've been addressing the corridor as a separate but parallel process, as you've heard before. And so we're in the process still with Transportation Commission of assessing what are the options within the corridor. Depending on the type of things we ultimately end up with, coming back to the council, it's very possible that we'll design those types of improvements with our own engineering staff. But if they're of other types, we may have to go out for a consultant for some of those other perhaps more complicated versions. Just depends on where we end up. So we're running those processes in parallel, as we've reported before, to council and the overall schedule. The idea here is for the bridge to get the design work underway, because it takes a little time to get through that design process and be in a position where we're able to go out to bid in the spring. So we're talking March, April, May timeframe to put this out on the street for bids for construction in 2018. The corridor concept work is also progressing along, and the intent there is to have a similar time frame in the spring for bidding whatever those improvements end up being, with design occurring, as I said, maybe by staff over the course of the winter once we figure out exactly what those are going to be. But the goal there would also be to take whatever corridor improvements we're going to construct in 18 and put those out to bid again in that probably April-May time frame. There is an art component to all our public works facilities, and so that's something we'll be looking at as well. Is there some component of art, public art, that should be included within the structure itself? It could be in the form of enhanced facilities on the structure and the handrail system and the approach to the rail systems, or something else. It could be something that we say that, hey, we're going to factor into the design the ability to add art into the structure at a later date. And there's a couple different ways to do that, but things that can be added into it as long as we design it up front that way. And then that would give us some time to go out through a public art process, and like we typically do with the arts department, if there's something we want to incorporate right into the structure. The other alternative, which does happen on some of our projects, if we don't believe there's a good way to actually incorporate the art into the structure itself, or the project itself, then the city does make payments from projects into the arts fund. The arts department then manages the creation of public art to go around town, but this would be an area that perhaps we could do something subsequently with the arts process to put art in the vicinity or in proximity to this structure. So there's a couple different ways, and we'll sort out how exactly that's going to happen as we move forward. But that is also part of the consideration. So the contracts before you with Keller is essentially a work order under our general services contract. It's task order number 4 under that contract. It is for the design services and construction management. Now, it's roughly half of each as far as the amount involved here. On the construction management side, what our goal is if as much as we can to have the engineering staff, public works staff, do as much of the construction management as we can. So where we can do an inspection, where we can do, the paperwork on pay estimates and all those kind of things, we're going to do as much of that as possible in-house, which will then reduce the cost of this contract. This is a time and materials-based contract with a not-to-exceed limit. So basically, we could build for what we use, right? So that's an area with the construction management where the more we can do, the less consultant service we need, the less we're paying on the contract. But we wanted to set it up in a way that if for some reason we are not able to provide that service internally, then the consultant will do that. Part of what we're looking at is other projects that maybe can be through consultant services, different things, just in terms of the overall budget management that we need to do within the department. But that would be the cap. The amount here, $122,880, which is the task order budget limit under task order number 4. So before you would be a request to authorize moving forward with that design services task order.
Jim, this was heard or reviewed by Public Works and Finance Committee on November the 13th?
Correct. It was gone through kind of line item at that meeting, and while there are a few minor details in there that look kind of wonky, it seemed like the general idea is spot on for what we're trying to do here. And the things that jumped out were there will be a cost for a meeting that was $1,500 for this meeting and $1,535 for the next one. That seemed very similar, and couldn't figure out why. That seemed kind of arbitrary, but most of the numbers with large number of zeros on the end seemed to be reasonable. So I guess if no one has any further questions, I would move that we approve the task order agreement for design and construction of management service with Keller and Associates in the amount not to exceed $122,880.
Second.
Okay, further discussion. Brandy.
Questions. Looking at the different tasks 1 through 6, and as you mentioned, they're kind of divided into 2 sections. So there's tasks 1 through 3 having to do with the evaluation and design components, and then the task 4 through 6 having to do with the actual construction oversight. There are a lot of unknowns still that I think you in particular are doing a very wonderful job of trying to get going with this whole traffic calming and involving the public. And I understand from that the first meetings have gone very well, and there are many to go. And what will ultimately be recommended by that transportation subcommittee, then the Transportation Commission, and to be followed by all the public input is still brings us out to late end of January, as I understand it. The actual cost of the bridge is an unknown, of course, because we don't have the bids out yet. One of my questions is, when was the initial cost estimate completed? You referenced that there is a cost estimate based on the precast. When was that done?
There were a couple of cost estimates done for different options, different types of bridges in this location, and I believe they were generally done about midwinter last year, if I remember correctly. Okay. And then ultimately those were the numbers that were carried forward into the budget process.
I wonder if we could assume about a 10% increase on what that cost would be now, based on that 10% increase being projected for other types of projects, coming later in the agenda. So that's one factor that I think could affect the final cost that we don't know yet because we don't have the bids. I'm concerned that we could be in a situation where once this traffic calming procedure is done and finalized, we find out the cost, we find out the actual cost of the bridge. It's possible that it may not be within the budget of the $580,000. And I might suggest consideration or discussion of separating the tasks into two sections, tasks 1 through 3, which, even if it were determined that we don't have it in the budget to do the whole project at once, which I think is what we need to do, those tasks could be completed. We could have the design, we could have the recommendations. That information would not really have an expiration date. It would be useful if the project had to be postponed, if that was determined at some point, depending on the budget and the cost. Could tasks 4 through 6, if it turned out that by the end of January and we find out what all these costs are and the bid on the bridge, which would be well before the April date that tasks 1 through 3 are completed, if it were to be determined that we can't go forward with tasks 4 through 6 right now, would you just make a change order to cancel those tasks within this contract? Can they be separated into two? Could we approve tasks 1 through 3 and not 4 through 6 until we have more information?
Okay. If I may, I think I heard 4 questions
I know.
there, so I'll try to capture all of them. In the way that we process projects, for pretty much all of them that we do, there's always the inherent challenge of knowing what the final cost is going to be. And yes, we see price escalation from year to year. It varies, and some years it goes way up, some years it goes up a little bit. So we're very conscious of that when we're doing cost estimating for projects, and there's usually a contingency percentage. It ranges anywhere from 10 to as much as 20-25%, depending on how far out you're looking, added to the estimated cost of the project. So there was a contingency in the numbers that drove then ultimately the budget that we have today. We won't really know, honestly, until the bids come in as to whether or not the estimate was correct or the updated construction engineer's estimate when we complete the design is correct. So that's the thing that, until bid day, until we open those envelopes, we don't know for sure, because it really depends on how many contractors are looking at it, the time of year, how hungry they are, how many jobs they have, the cost of concrete at that particular given time, the cost of steel. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So we do the best we can. We do this every year, and we do this with all our projects where we're estimating what we think it's going to be. We put in the contingencies. Most of the time we hit pretty well. Every once in a while we get one that just blows up. The council will then ultimately make that decision about, okay, do we proceed if we've got a higher than anticipated cost, whether it's within the budget or not, or do we repackage it in some way and rebid it? Do we postpone it? Do we just make it go away? All of those have happened at different times throughout the years. So that's the first part. In terms of the structure of the contract, as I mentioned, it's a time and materials not to exceed. So we could start the project and then a weekend say, we've changed our mind, we're going to stop, we'll pay you for the time that you've expended, and we're done. Right? So that makes it pretty easy when it comes to your thought about could we split these. Okay. Essentially, we work our way through these tasks, and if we reach a point where we say, yes, we've gone through design, or even if we've gone through preliminary design, and some reason we come back and say, guess what, our numbers were just completely wrong, and it's 3 times the price, and we're just going to stop and regroup, then you stop, the contract doesn't pay out anymore, and you're done. Okay. I don't think that'll happen. Typically, we've not had that experience. But, if for some reason something came up that caused us to have to stop somewhere along the way, we just pay out the services we've expended to that point and we're done. And that's why on the construction management side, we can very easily say, this is the estimated time, but the more staff time we can put into it, the less of their time we need. We then don't pay them for what's in here because they're not actually expending time.
Other discussion.
There was another question there, but I think I've lost it.
Well,
So.
no, I think I may have asked the same question in a couple different ways, and you answered, and I think that the timing before we would even get to those other tasks, we would have the answers to a lot of those unknowns that I was referring to.
Yeah, and to some extent that is true in that we'll go through the selection process, and again, as I mentioned, that preliminary assessment of different types, part of that's going to be looking at the cost. right? Which, based on, general estimates and experience of projects built in recent years that the contractor's seen or contractors have seen or our consultant has seen or we have seen, what do we estimate those different types of bridges are going to cost? So we'll have those updates to our original staff-generated estimates. Then selection is made, presumably we'll continue. We get on through design, 50%, 90% design, 95%, ultimately to 100% design package. And while we're doing that, they are updating their estimate. They're giving us a detailed estimate that says, okay, here's the amount of concrete involved, or here's the cost of a precast arch if that's what we're doing, here's the cost of foundation work, the asphalt work, all those line items are estimated. So we end up with an engineer's estimate for the bid process. And at that time, again, we'll have kind of a check-in, if you will, that says, okay, this number is within expectations, or no, what's up here. And so then that's that opportunity, again, to look at it and say, okay, do we need to do something different? Do we just proceed? What is the answer? So I think there are several times along the way where that kind of an assessment of how we're doing budget-wise comes into play.
Thank you.
You have another question?
I do. The older work task order for the land surveying and geotechnical work, what was the amount, and is that part of this $580,000?
It is. It was task order number 3. Part of what we have with our general services agreements is we've been able to process the small task orders through an administrative process for the most part. I don't remember the specific dollar amount on that one. I think it was 12,000, I believe, was the figure for and that was for the geotech work and the survey work. And we processed that one separately simply because of the timing involved, and we needed to make sure we got out there before it started snowing on us to get the survey work and those kind of things underway. That is, I believe, generally coming out of this same overall budget.
Oh, that's included in this 122?
Not this 122,
Okay.
that 12 out of the 580.
So with the contract with them includes the 12, which that portion would be completed, that task order before the.
They will overlap a bit, but yes,
Okay.
they both be happening this fall, this winter.
Okay. Everybody understand? We've got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the task order for design and construction management services with Keller and Associates in the amount not to exceed $123,880. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you, Les. We will move on to item number 10 now, which is proposal for replacement in a police station, repurposing of current police station, and bond information that Gary Reedner will present to us. You have the podium, Gary.
Thank you, Your Honor. You have a second to set up here. Thank you for the opportunity to present what we hope to be a culminating recommendation from staff based upon direction given to the City Council for what amounts to probably the last 18 to 20 months regarding addressing city facilities. Staff has been working on this since about late 2015, early 2016, so I'll start with the narrative. We did a city facilities master plan in 2015. This was one of the several comprehensive and master plans that were completed by staff over the period of about 12 years, including the examples are the Parks and Rec Master Plan, the Multimodal Transportation Plan, Water and Sewer Comprehensive Plan, and City of Moscow Master Facilities Plan. The idea was to prepare enough information so that the council could move forward with adopting a strategic plan which would address the city's needs in the next 5, 10, and 20 years. So that was a stated objective of the council, and this was one of the plans supporting that strategic plan, which we then moved ahead with in 2016. That plan that was done in 2015 had a four-phase approach to addressing city facilities issues. The first one was the construction, and these numbers, these square footage numbers, are mostly a result of forecasting both growth rates of the department based on population and service increases, as well as numbers of employees that would be utilizing those facilities. So in the 2015, a 13,000 square foot police station was estimated about $4.8 million. Phase 2, and these were all in addressing the most high priority needs as shown by the facility study. Expansion and reconstruction of the city shop and associated office spaces. This is the city shop out adjacent to Polk Street. And as you know, we've talked about improvements out there for the past several years. As you can see, the price tag on that project fairly large, between $7 and $10 million. And even that number has been revised in some of the recent planning studies. Phase 3, construct a new city office building to replace the Mann building, which is undersized and near the end of its serviceable life. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get further on in the proposal. It had been our assumption, based upon preliminary studies, that the Mann building was at the end of its useful life. The cracking, as you go over there, it's a cinder block building without any rebar, I believe, is what has been told to me. We hired a structural engineer to do an assessment of the building. It turns out that the cracking and the joint issues that you see are mostly superficial, and with grouting, that building can still serve the city for many years into the future. So that means something as well. It allows us to utilize a facility that we previously thought was heading toward obsolescence, and it turns out that it does have a serviceable life that will continue to serve the city. And Phase 4, remodel the City Hall basement. As you know, we are tight for space in City Hall based upon the configuration of this building as a federal courthouse and post office. It doesn't lend itself terrifically to an office building. We have needs of space for our Human Resources Department as well as our Information Systems Department. That estimate was about $700,000. Since that time, because of the extreme cost of that, Information Services has taken up temporary residence at the former administrative offices at the Egan Youth Center, and we've done a little bit of remodeling upstairs to allow HR to function as well. But those were the four main priorities as set out by the Facilities Master Plan. So the facility study talked about the current police facilities, services facility, the police station, citing inadequate space, inefficient configuration, and limited access for emergency response. As you know, the current police station on 4th Street formerly served as City Hall. Half of that building was the police station until about 1995, at which time the rest of the city offices moved to this building, and the police took over that entire building. It's been remodeled several times. It has a construction that is easily adapted to additional uses because of the roof configuration and the support configuration, but it is inefficient, at least at this point, because we haven't done a wholesale gut it and remodel it. And that would not, if it were to be done, it still would not serve as an adequate police facility because of the limited access that it has to traffic. It's on a one-way couplet, the Washington Street to the north. If the police wish to respond to the south, they either have to go out 4th Street, across to Jefferson Street, back to 6th Street, and access the south in that way, or they can go down the alley between Main and Washington and get out that way as well in a highly traveled pedestrian area. So access is not very good in an emergency situation. Facility study also identified there was overcrowding, inadequate reception. And by inadequate reception, it's not that the reception area is not utilized. It is utilized. However, it is not as safe as it could be. In a modern police facility, they have bulletproof glass. They have steel that protects the reception folks from any possible attack. Those are standard things that you have in police stations at this point. Meeting and storage space, at the Mann Building is also an area that is inadequate as well. In the Mann Building, community development was deemed to be deficient by about 2,063 feet, or 54%, so it was less than half adequate by 2023. Engineering was projected to be 66% inadequate in that same period of time. This, of course, is only 5 years into the future. Information systems was projected to be deficient by 50% in 2023. Of course, we did adjust that by the temporary residents at the Eagan Youth Center. However, permanent residents having your information systems at a remote location when most of their work is done downtown utilizes a lot of burning up of personal time. Inefficiencies, when they were in City Hall, they could react to a lot of needs very quickly, and that's been taken away. Okay, our city strategic plan. In 2016, Council recalls that a strategic plan was implemented, and there were major challenge areas that were focused upon in the plan that were essentially standing in the way of the city moving forward in the direction that the Council wanted it to move. One of the top Tier 1 internal major challenge area was a deteriorating and substandard police facility, which is one of the reasons that the Council directed staff to do some work to determine how that could be addressed. So these were the issues that were identified in the strategic plan. Lack of a secure location, limited access on the 4th Street cul-de-sac, lack of sufficient space, and insufficient storage and evidence space. It seems that we are constantly having to find additional space for police records. It has to be secure space. Of course, evidence space is always at a premium, and evidence has to be held until either the case is over, or the court directs that evidence can be released. So space is at a premium on that single level police station on 4th Street. And if you've been in that, you can see it's been remodeled many times, still has hollow core doors, a lot of the things that would not be standard design in a modern police facility. Okay, as I indicated, the recycling center was also an area, and according to the memo in your packet, if you've reviewed that we had different areas in our recycling plan, or MCA, that we needed to deal with as well. One is to increase the overall capacity and capability of the city's recycling program and facilities, and then complete the city's facilities master plan, and then depending on the outcome of the master plan, procure a new recycling center site, new facility design that much better meets the city's needs into the future. And lastly, implement and promote participation in the single-stream curbside recycling program by January 2016. As the Council knows, we have proceeded with a roll cart garbage program. We have a curbside single-stream recycling program, which has replaced the curbside collection program and the commodity drop-off at the current recycling center has reduced in capacity or reduced in use since those programs have been implemented. The single-stream recycling program does not involve the separation of commodities as it did before, does not lend itself to the site and a building that was designed for that separation program, storage of commodities, so on and so forth. In the single-stream recycling program, the single-stream recycling is taken to a site, it's baled, it's sent off to a material recovery facility, or a MRF. You've heard Tim Davis talk about that into the past. So it's essentially a collection, processing, baling facility where then it's shipped out. That is a process that can be done almost anywhere. Having it done in a building that was not designed for it in the middle of a commercial residential neighborhood does not seem to be the best use. Secondly, as we'll talk about in a little while, we have a fairly robust plant materials drop-off, lawn and trees and that sort of thing behind the recycling center on Almond Street. This has always been deemed to be inadequate. We've fixed it a couple of times, redesigned it so it is as usable as it can be. It's used quite a bit. sometimes used by commercial establishments as well. That was not the intent for it, but it is utilized a lot. It is at the top of a vertical curve on Almond Street, meaning that visibility is somewhat limited to people traveling both north and south on Almond Street, creating issues for people backing into the facility or pulling out from the facility. So those are challenges that we have in that area. Okay, the city bond measure in 2015, late 2015, council directed us to explore up to a $10 million GO bond election to address several community needs, including the police facility we talked about. And these estimates were from 2015 as well, so they're a little bit outdated, as Brandy indicated. One of the things we'll talk about today is perhaps inflation of these because they are fairly complex projects. Fire equipment replacement. This was to replace aging fire trucks that we have in the city's fleet. The original plan was to replace 4 or 3 engines and 1 ladder truck in the bond election, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the future as well. Park development, that was an area the council, because we have undeveloped parkland, council wanted to address that, at least in an incremental fashion. Downtown infrastructure, it's been since about 1984, since, except for Friendship Square, that significant improvements have been done to downtown since the downtown LID was completed. And as you can see, as you know, if you walk downtown, that infrastructure is aging and needs to be upgraded or replaced. Now that the Farmers Market has taken up residence for 26 weeks on Main Street, we'd like to be able to address that in a way that complements that 26-day festival as well. Street maintenance and repair, this is an area that has been a focus of the council for the past several years, wanting to give a shot in the arm to the street maintenance program to try and put additional monies into streets. City shop, as we talked about, was an area that was also an MCA, Tier 1 MCA in the development program, or at least the facilities plan, but because of issues going on, we've been unable to determine a cost of that. Okay. So, in talking about the new police facility, a lot of this PowerPoint will talk about that as well. Fire equipment replacement, as the memo in the packet explained, council gave direction a year ago that they wanted to determine whether or not we could pay for fire apparatus out of current budget. With that direction, that was a priority. 1 fire truck is on order. It will be delivered in February or March of 2018. Another fire truck is due to be ordered in 2018 for 2019 delivery. And as you know from the last council meeting, we recently, as recent as last Friday, submitted a community development block grant application for a fire truck, which might accelerate that replacement a little bit as well. With that plan, and which was presented to the council in this year's FY18 budget, there is no need to pursue fire equipment in this bond issue, so that is now out of the equation. Park development, council by resolution in May of 2017 directed that the remaining Hamilton funding, which is around $1.9 million, give or take, would be restricted for use in installing and replacing playground equipment in parks and to provide accessible pathways to that playground equipment. In addition, the Parks Department has developed a pretty innovative plan for incremental development of parks. They've sent people away to training so they can install playgrounds. They're able to do some of the scraping and shaping of parks and plant those parks, install irrigation systems as well. So they're addressing that. It's not a quick fix, but it is a way to get the parks that have been dedicated to the city and have access to public right-of-way that is accessible to get them developed sooner rather than later. So that issue also came off the menu for the bond issue. Downtown infrastructure, one of the things that's being addressed in that way, one of the things with the limited amount of money that was available, staff looked at replacement of what appears to be the most deteriorated part of the downtown infrastructure. That is the intersections of the streets in downtown. The aggregate crosswalks are spalled, sometimes falling apart, have cracks, separations between the pavement and the crosswalks. So that was about all that we could address with this amount of money. Since that time, the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency has indicated that they are considering the expansion of the Legacy Crossing District to the west side of the public right-of-way on Main Street, which would provide additional opportunities for economic development and partnering with the city to address those issues. So again, that issue seems not ripe for this bond issue. Street repair and maintenance. In looking at that, a $1 million shot in the arm would be appreciated. However, at the time this was developed, the city had budgeted $375,000, I believe, for the streets maintenance project, the annual street maintenance project. Since that time, due to council direction, also due to the fact that the state raised the fuel tax, allowing even more money to come back to street department. That has grown to $750,000 in last budget year, and this year I believe it's $840,000 if memory serves. So we have essentially doubled that, and so that has become an addressed priority in a different way. City shop, on the other hand, there have been a lot of scoping that's been done, preliminary conceptual designs and discussions with all of the departments that share that facility. The cost has been extremely high. It's a big facility. It serves a lot of needs. So because of that cost, it couldn't be addressed at all in a $10 million bond measure. So staff is working with the consultants on some different alternatives to determine if that can be addressed in a different way. Different way has a lot of different issues regarding that. It might mean having different operations in different places around the city, if that makes sense operationally and from a monetary standpoint. So those are just some of the things that are going on. So essentially, what we're really talking about is facilities themselves. So in that, in order to investigate all of these issues, the city formed these technical advisory committees to deal with each of these. They're all pretty self-explanatory until you get down to the Finance Technical Advisory Committee and the Public Relations Communications Technical Advisory Committee. And those were in place to assist in determining what financial issues were present. And then Public Relations Communications is to take that message to the public. As you know, for a general obligation bond, it requires 66 2/3% in the state of Idaho in order to pass that bond. Obviously, and it is a bond election. So we need to get information out to the public, let them see what's going on so that they can make an informed decision when it comes time to vote for it. So that is essentially the crux of the process in coming up to the proposal that is coming before you. So one of the things that occurred, and you'll notice in the packet of information that you have in your council packets, you'll see that Recycle Center Police Services Facility Assessment with a date of December 2016 on it, about 11 months ago. That was worked on from about February of 2016 until December of 2016. Council authorized us to retain LCA Architects out of Boise to assist us with that, and they worked with the police and the other TAC team to determine where would be the best place to locate a police facility. And discussions were had around the idea was to keep the police facility as close to downtown as possible in order to maintain that connection with central downtown. And it came down to a couple of choices. One of the best choices, because of accessibility and access for travel north, south, east, and west, was the recycling center site on Jackson Street. So, and then about October, maybe November of 2016, we approached Gritman Medical Center to determine if there was any opportunity to discuss the ability of the city to purchase the federal building in downtown, which in turn was purchased by Gritman some time ago, to determine if that could be repurposed as a police facility, as well as managing or allowing us to put a couple of other city operations in there, most notably community development, engineering, and information systems. We discussed that, retained some architectural assistance with that, assessed the building, so on and so forth. That discussion and all of those processes took a long time. So it wasn't until this fall when it was determined that that had a lot of issues to it, and the project was abandoned because it wasn't feasible and wouldn't be pursued. So we went back to the drawing board, came forward with this facilities plan that had been mothballed essentially since December. So this is a study that's in your packet. It's not online, but certainly is available. The idea was to explore the idea of placing a police station on the current recycling center site. The recycling center facility has several things that limit its use or its effectiveness as a recycling center. Again, not well suited for the new single stream system and inadequate storage processing capacity. The customer drop-off and redemption is not well configured. It has expanded a lot from the time it was first constructed in 1994. There have been several issues with conflicts between the forklift necessary removal of bins and people utilizing the drop-off. So at any rate, it would have been redesigned in the near future as well if it was at least deemed adequate. The yard waste drop-off underside creates the safety concerns on Almond Street, as we've talked about. And as a result, the sanitation department is got an RFP, a request for proposals, to complete a comprehensive assessment and master planning process. This was discussed and authorized in the FY 2018 budget. The idea is to, with all of these new services being provided, as well as a question of ultimate disposal of garbage, we're coming into a time when we will be either renewing or putting out an RFP for disposal services as well. Currently, our disposal services, garbage is disposed of in Boardman, Oregon. There may be some alternatives that Tim Davis, our sanitation manager, wishes to explore before we re-up that contract. And that is the last term of a 30-year contract. So it's been renewed several times. This is the last 5-year renewal. Want to make sure that we're doing it right. But he will be moving forward with an RFP in that way, as well as this comprehensive assessment and master planning process. This master planning will also include a public outreach program to determine what the wants and needs of the community are. What does the community want? Is the community utilizing the recycling center? I know one of the things that has been discussed over the years, the recycling center is not, you don't need to flash a Latah County or Moscow, City of Moscow ID to use it. So how many Whitman County people use it? How many people from other jurisdictions use it? The city pays, the ratepayers pay Moscow Recycling a certain amount of money for every ton of recyclables through that recycling center. So naturally, if it's being utilized by people who are not paying for those services, it raises the per ratepayer subsidy. So those are things that we wanted to look at. Okay, this is the current configuration of the recycling center now. You have, let me get my configuration right. This is Jackson Street, this is C Street, this is Almond Street. Yard waste drop-off here. This was obviously when it was cleaned up. This is the Stuckey's building. This is the current recycling center site. This is the footprint of the original lot that we purchased from Helbling Land Company years ago. It's former Burlington Northern right-of-way. This was a piece of property that we purchased from that same Helbling Land Company, I believe, and we installed C Street on it and then bought this for recycling center expansion. That was held off as we were moving forward with our other initiatives. So that we're really talking about this area right here as being the recycling center. Okay, this is a overhead sketch of the configuration of the facility. It's, I believe, 15,000 square feet, if I'm not mistaken. It has public parking here, secured parking, storage building, so on and so forth. Again, preliminary conceptual designs based upon planning that was pursued among LCA architects and the police administration and users of the facility. This is the interior configuration. Again, conceptual design only. A lobby, office spaces. It includes a public meeting room, I believe, in the facility, yes. So there are some really innovative things that can be utilized in the design. But again, it's conceptual only. What we looked at was, is the site adequate for a police station? Does it meet the accessibility? Does it meet the size requirement? So on and so forth. And the bottom line is that it does. LCA's preliminary concepts have been vetted out by those who will use it, and appears to be a pretty good design. This is the look from looking to the, I believe, the northeast, so, or northwest. So again, this is Jackson here. This is the front part of the facility, public parking and secure parking in the rear. This is a profile from the front. Again, from that same angle that we just had to the northwest. Okay, then we get into the dollars. This was the original concept estimate by LCA Architects. As you can see, it was $5.345 million. That was the estimated total project cost in December of 2016. One of the things, this was, of course, since it had been sitting around a year, and we've been talking to the council about increased costs of construction since that time, especially for buildings. We wanted to have that updated as we're bringing that back. So this is the updated, and you can see it is a little bit different. It is about, and it's running off the bottom of the page. So let me get
6,996.
Yes, $6,996,000. Now, what did it address that wasn't addressed in January or December of 2016? First, construction costs have increased because of the lack of labor. The market is high, the construction is high, and there have been several natural disasters which are also taking away capacity for construction. In December 1 of 16, those costs, we've taken a 10% factor, increased those costs as well. And the cost escalated, was extended to 2019 because by the time, if this is approved, it will be designed in 2018, constructed in 2019. We've added an escalation factor of 7.5% to the bottom line. The idea was because of if the market stays high, construction continues to go on, it will take people a time to get back into the market. This is a way to make sure if we're asking the public to vote on a project, that we have enough capital to do the project. Lastly, the previous estimate by LCA did not include sanitation fund property reimbursement of $586,000. The recycling center site is owned by the sanitation fund, which is an enterprise fund. City operates our enterprise funds, which are the sanitation, the water and sewer funds as businesses. They're separate from the general fund, and if the general fund is going to take over an enterprise fund facility, the general fund needs to pay the enterprise fund for that facility. This land upon which the recycling center is located was purchased by the sanitation fund, so the general fund will have to purchase that from the sanitation fund. So we're right at $7 million for the construction of the 15,000 square foot police facility. Okay? So one of the other things that we tried to do in dealing with the federal building was to try and get some capacity to address some of the city's other facilities needs. If the bond effort is successful and a new police station is constructed on Jackson Street, it will leave open the 4th Street facility. It's about 8,740 square feet. It's a facility, as I indicated, is easily remodeled. It does have challenges. Its challenges are that it's been rebuilt so many times on the inside that you essentially need to go in, take what's good, take the stuff that's bad, gut it out, as the support structure for the roof makes it easily adaptable to other office uses. So the framework, the roof is good. We're just installing, because it is an emergency facilities, we're just installing a new generator so it has emergency power. It does have ADA access issues, and we've looked at perhaps addressing those as well. But the idea, what the plan is, or what the recommendation from staff is, as we get into the man building, as I stated, with the square footage limitations that we have in community development and engineering, they're about 50% less space than they will need within the next 5 years, which is to say that they have less space than they need now. So that one of the things that we look at when additional staff or interns are requested in those departments is, where will we put them? And one of the things we've looked at is having interns, or can we split out a part of their operation into another building. And anytime you break up those operations that are intricate to themselves, it wastes time, just like IS being out at the Egan Youth Center. It takes time. They should be working on something, and they're using it traveling. So we talked about the community, or the facilities master plan, talked about as it relates to community development and information systems. Human resources was also one of the reason they're in here is because human resources was going to be relocated to the basement of City Hall when that remodel project was going to take off. So they've been included in here as a potential for going to a remodeled facility. Excuse me. So, again, these were the amounts that were in the facilities master plan of 2015. So those are just the numbers we talked about before. The man building is 4,050 square feet. So by transferring community development and engineering to the 4th Street location would position them where they need to be with their projected space needs. So it's a facility that is already owned by the city, it's already tax exempt, and it's something that we need to address the space needs, not just the condition of the man building where they're located at this time, but how do we expand that? We've looked at, is it possible to expand the man building either to the west? Is it possible to expand it to the south? Is it possible to go up with it? The bottom line is that adding on to that building will be very expensive because it isn't structurally sound. You can't really go up with it, meaning that you can't put a second story on it. So this is a way for us to address those needs as well. So let's see, we've talked about this already. Okay, we indicated the man building, and that structural assessment is available if anybody wants to look at it for the man building. It is not the most interesting reading in the world, but they do tell you that the building essentially is structurally sound, if not able to be expanded. Talking about freeing up the space in the Egan Youth Center, the idea would be to move at least information systems, if not HR, to the man building. More accessible, ground level, put IS back downtown, as well as providing much needed storage. If you've been down in the basement of City Hall, we have a lot of storage issues. As you know, one of the clerk's main jobs is to maintain the city's records. Community development, when they have commercial building plans, they hold on to those indefinitely. As more and more buildings are constructed, more and more of those plans are retained. We have financial records. We have the city's clerk's records, so on and so forth. So the idea would be to remodel part of the man building for storage as well. This is just a very basic space analysis of things that could happen in the 4th Street location, the former police station. I do want to point one thing out, and that is that the idea would be to change the access into that building from the only ADA access is back here along Washington Street next to Caney Brothers Music, next to the alley. You have to go all the way around through here if you're in a wheelchair or need disabled access. If that entrance could be changed right here to the lobby, you'd have axial access down both axes of the building, and would make for a more inviting and accessible area for the public. So that's the idea. There would be, where the police now have their parking, would be for probably work vehicles for, the vans, the inspection vehicles, engineering vehicles, as well as there'd have to be customer parking as well. So, again, one of the things that we're doing in anticipation is we are talking to a consulting architect to take a look and see if it would be possible to come up with a similar conceptual design for this building as was for the police station on Jackson Street. So again, this is just a mock-up done by staff. But what would it cost to do this? And again, before we get into that, on the man building, what we're really talking about is doing some basic remodeling upstairs and downstairs to adapt it to the use, as well as fixing up the outside. It has to be regrouted, repainted, and those sorts of things. So very minor changes to that building. Okay, what would the cost be? 4th Street building, access to go ahead and renovate it with what you saw there, or at least something like it, is about $902,000. And that is to fix the ADA access, make it a usable office building. Excuse me, I think I'm running out of vocal cord horsepower here. Okay, so that is an additional $902,000. The man building, much less, $227,000. And again, we have built these on the same basis as the police station on Jackson Street, the same estimates, so on and so forth. So we have contingencies, escalations, and those sorts of things. Now, of course, this would have to be a multiple phased approach, because you couldn't move the folks from community development engineering until the police station's done. The police were moved from their facility over there. You then need to build or remodel the police station, former police station, to house those folks. As soon as community development and engineering move over there, you can then begin the remodel on the man building. So it moves ahead, and it's about a 3-year process, or at least a 2-year process. So we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So, taking all those together, we have a construction costs and project costs of about $8,125,207. And again, this is an estimate at this point, and we need to retain some professional cost estimators to help us with this, so we dial it in even more, because if the council decides to direct us to move forward with this, we will need some pretty good estimates to go forward to the public with. So, this is the project timeline I just talked about. We can talk about how the bond election will proceed if we are authorized to proceed with that. But as we're talking about designing the police services building after, if there is a successful bond election in 2018, bidding, construction, occupancy, design, bidding, construction, and again, just the same thing repeated. Now, there is some room for some economies here. For instance, you could start the 4th Street renovation design while the police are still in the building. So we can still amend the timeline somewhat, but we're still talking about at least 2 to 3 years in order to do this entire series of projects. Okay, staff recommendation. One thing I noted in the memo in your packets today, that in discussing the multiple project that we had discussed back in 2015. Bond counsel and our financial advisor advised us that if you have different projects that are different things, like constructing or fixing parks and rec parks versus general public facilities, you have to have a vote for the general public facilities and a separate question for the parks, a separate question for street improvements. So you might have had 4 or 5 questions on the same ballot. Now, each of those questions will either succeed or fail, whether the individual you meet the 66 2/3 requirement. So their suggestion was, in order to reduce confusion, focus the city's efforts and the public's attention on a public facilities bond. Since the council had the MCA for a police facility was the top issue, that we had very real space needs in the man building, that and information systems, that you could have a single bond question regarding city facilities. And then, of course, your public outreach talks about the separate projects within that public facilities, but if those were the direction of the city council, it would be a single bond question. That measure we're estimating right now at $8.5 million because we have not retained professional assistance to get our estimates. As I indicated, it was 8.125. We're assuming there's going to be some adjustments going forward. So we're looking tonight, want the council to understand that this is the approximate range we're talking about. That number will be refined in the future as we get more information. So right now, the steps that we're proposing, we ask council to give us direction on, is that, as I indicated, sanitation manager will issue the request for proposals to move ahead with the master planning process as authorized in the budget. Second, that we will retain a design professional to refine the 4th Street and man building renovation conceptual plans and construction cost estimates. That's already been done for the police station on Jackson Street. Now we need to do it for 4th Street and the man building. And lastly, that staff will bring the final proposed facilities project package to the council for your review and approval no later than the council's February 5th meeting. This is in conformance with a estimated timeline by our bond professional and our, financial professional and bond counsel, indicating that it usually takes about 2 months. Once your project is completed and council authorizes it to go ahead, you then need to take that project out to the public. So the idea is to put together a series of community meetings, those sorts of things, to get the project out there for people to look at. And so when you have your election in May, people are voting on something that they have a lot of information about. So with that, that is what we're asking authorization to proceed, and I'll stand for any questions you may have.
I think the biggest thing you're going to run into, Gary, number one, the public is going to need to know exactly what we're doing. The amount of money it's going to cost them. If you have a house that's $200,000 house, they're going to want to know what that is going to cost them for a general obligation bond, whatever that amount is. So we need to be able to, as we go forward and we talk to folks, we know what the council up here pretty well knows of the major challenge areas in the master plan that we're looking at, and the infrastructure that we need to continue to maintain moving as we go along as a city. But what's going to be significant is for everybody to see what we're doing, so it's right out in the open, of course, and basically what it costs them. I mean, people are going to want to know that. And also, why are we doing it? A lot of times, frequently, folks don't know why we're doing something or why we're looking forward to spending money or whatever. And one of the big reasons that we need to continue with our infrastructure is so that we can keep it up, so we're not kicking the can down the road and it becomes a huge problem for somebody later on that you simply can't afford. And one other point that I want to make, and I'm going to turn it over so council can talk about this, is our general obligation bond will be, that we currently have, will be paid off in May. And that's
August of 18.
Yeah. Okay, well, December 2018. So the point of it is I think that's a a point that we need to tell folks so that we can kind of keep on going, because our city does need some type of leverage as we're going along to enhance our infrastructure as time passes as an ongoing type of a thing. So,
if I could have one more comment, Your Honor. And I think you make a good point, and I meant to give the council background on that. Your bonding capacity is set by Idaho code based on your assessed value of taxable property within your city. Because of our assessed value, our bonding capacity is approximately $21 million. Right now, the only bond that we have outstanding is what remains on the 20-year Hamilton Low Aquatic Center bond. I believe it's about $270,000. Don't quote me on that. But the final bond payment will be made in August of 2018. So we have bonding capacity that is not tapped at this point. One of the council's directions back in 2015, 2016 was that they wanted to retain enough capacity so if something came up, an emergency, we would have bonding capacity left that we'd be able to access. The idea to move forward is based upon a 10-year payback, and as the mayor indicated, what interests people is how much are you paying for that bond now, the current bond, how much will this bond end up costing a taxpayer, and we will develop all of that information and have it available for, typically we run a $150,000 house, a $200,000 house, a $250,000, $300,000 house. We'll have all those scenarios and what it essentially means. I thought that was one of the things that City of Pullman did very effectively in their bond election here a couple weeks ago, was they told folks this is what it will raise your taxes over this period of time, and these are the benefits that you're going to get from if you do this. So that would be the same thing. That's what we did when we did the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center. It's what we did when we did Fire Station number 3. So it's a well-known approach.
One other quick point, too, is that most people don't hang out at our police department, so they'd want to know why they need a new police department. Because most people just don't go into the police department. I get a chance to as a mayor as well as a councilor, and you yourself as a city supervisor. So we need to make sure that we can have folks visit that. Okay, I'll open it up for. Did you have something, Catherine? You wanted Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, your total facilities project cost of $8,125,000 does not include a new recycle center. By moving it up to $8.5 million for the bond, are you assuming you'll have enough money to do that?
We actually, because again, it's an enterprise fund, the recycling center will have, or the sanitation fund, will have the funds that are paid by the general fund back to the sanitation fund, which can then be used to get a new recycling site once it's defined what that recycling site would be and the services that would be provided. In addition, we've been accumulating in the Sanitation Enterprise Fund for recycling center relocation and or development. So we do have an amount of money that's in there already that we can utilize for the recycling piece of it.
So it's not, so the recycling center relocation will not be part of the bond issue?
No, it is related only because of the interchange of the sites, but it is not, no funds, none of these bond funds will be used to support the enterprise fund.
Okay. And if I may?
Go ahead, Walter.
In your new police station cost estimate, they've only got a 5% construction contingency. That's too low. You've got 15 on both the man building and the remodel of the police department. Those two estimates, I think, were done in-house.
Yes.
Probably. And that's much more realistic. So.
And that's one of the, it's funny you say that. That's one of the things that we went through it, that we want to go back, revisit it. That's why we're asking for at least capacity to go to 8.5.
This may end up being 8.8. We don't know yet.
Exactly.
Until we get that defined, that'll be something that'll be in front of us.
And then finally, if I may, Gary, I remember in the last, I think, few weeks, I believe you were the one that made a comment that you didn't say the man building was structurally unsound, but you did not say that it was as structurally sound as you're saying tonight.
Yeah.
Do I
you're
remember
exactly
correctly?
Right. it has been our belief that because of the cracking, and it isn't just cracking like down a brick, it is serial cracking showing what we, at least what our people thought were almost fault lines or heave lines in the bricks. So that was one of the reasons that we asked council for funds to retain a structural engineer so we could find out, because our anticipation was you can't really fix it. Well, we had a structural engineer come in. They have not made invasive tests yet, but their initial assessment is that the building is structurally sound and that those cracks are superficial and merely need grouting. So it was a surprise to us as well. I believe what you're referring to is back probably sometime during the budget process. I think I made that comment, and I think I referred to it as functionally nearing the end of its useful life.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Okay. Randy?
What do you anticipate the parking needs? I hate to bring up the parking word, but for the 4th Street relocation of engineering and...
The idea would be there may be some ability to rent some space. As you know, Gritman still owns a federal building. They have a parking lot adjacent to it. We'd explore that. All of those vehicles are parked here in our facility now, so that is available. The police have all of the adjacent parking on the north side of 4th Street. It's anticipated that that would be retained for that. There's also one parking space along Washington Street, I believe, that is also 2 that are assigned to the police department. Probably we might extend that by another vehicle or something, whatever can fit comfortably.
I mean, do you feel that the parking that exists there could accommodate the needs of the people working in that building with some overflow in this other location?
Doubtful it would accommodate everybody who works there, but you have to understand, the police now, most of the parking along 4th Street on the east side of Washington is taken up by officers who park their personal vehicles there. Actually, there would probably be, at least during the day, a few more employees with community development and engineering than currently are employed at the police department. But we believe there will still be parking available in this lot, so we think it is adequate.
And
go ahead.
Could there be any potential benefit to separating the police from the other 2 as far as, ensuring or increasing the likelihood that we get this police station done? I mean,
certainly it's something that we've discussed. However, you've got a 10-year lag time typically. If there is a successful vote for a GO bond and it's a 10-year payoff, we will not be doing any additional capital construction on this scale for an additional 10 years. Our studies show that community development and engineering are already woefully inadequate in space. So we believe that if the project is approached in the right way, we're addressing the MCA and 2 other MCAs as well, we're also utilizing a facility that is already owned by the city. The investment in it is relatively small compared to the up to $5 million investment in a new office building. We believe that that's a compelling story, and the public will look at the economics of that and say, yeah, let's take care of the issue. If you recall, one of the reasons the council wanted to move ahead with the federal building discussion was not only does it keep it very central, the police station, it also allows, that's a 44,000 square foot building, and it allowed the entire top floor, had that been successful, for other city uses, addressing city space needs for probably the next 20 to 25 years at it would have been a really nice facility. This does the same thing, not quite consolidating people in one space, but allowing us to address those same needs for approximately the same period of time.
Yeah, for a lot less money.
right. I mean, I love the idea of reusing these buildings rather than having it vacant and what would happen, I mean, with that. So I think that's, I love that idea. I just... bundling them together could be a good thing if you really get that education piece out there, or it could jeopardize
Absolutely.
everything. So
And we recognize that we really need to get out there. That technical advisory committee that talked about public information, and we will discuss all kinds of ways to get that information out. And the idea is to give people, here are the facts, so that when they get in that voting booth, they're actually making a decision that makes economic sense.
Mm-hmm. And one last thing. So I assume that this means ideas or maybe brief discussions that have happened in the past about a joint law enforcement facility with the county is over and done with, or is that something that's...
It's been about 10 years, maybe a little longer, since we pursued joint law enforcement. We did that back when, I believe, Sheriff Roush and Dan Weaver was our chief of police. Council commissioners were both involved in that discussion. We proceeded with that. It turned out that at the end, it was a situation that wasn't deemed to move forward. The county didn't want to pursue it anymore, so we dropped it at that time. The facility that was being discussed at that time was much larger than one that would serve the city's needs. Council at that time, and I believe to this day, feel that the city police department should be fairly centrally located. There's no building in proximity to downtown, no building site that would allow for a joint city-county joint law enforcement facility. Additionally, there are a lot of issues that need to be resolved regarding how the collaboration, cooperation goes in that facility. The estimate, if memory serves me correctly, and I have the file in my office, if my memory is not lying to me, I believe the cost of that joint law enforcement facility at that time, which had a significant jail component to it, was something around $18 to $20 million, so significantly more than this. There are also other issues that need to be resolved if that is going to be a discussion. One of the things, the county and the city don't have similar services in some ways. For instance, joint law enforcement, dispatch services. The city has made the decision to be part of the Whitcomb system. Latah County has its own dispatch system, so that would have to be resolved. There'd be county, if they have not decided to join Whitcomb or do something else, a joint law enforcement facility would have to have a dispatch center, which either the city would have to say, okay, we want to be part of that and pull out of Whitcomb, or the county would have to say they're going to Whitcomb or doing something else. So that is a big issue, and that was a huge discussion when dispatch came out. Some of the other things, and I know the current sheriff is looking at addressing some of these issues. We have incompatible record software. The county sheriff decided to go a different way than the city of Moscow did. The city of Moscow had compatible software, records-keeping software with Whitman County, city of Lewiston, and a lot of folks. Latah County decided to go with a vendor out of Boise that didn't have that same widespread compatibility. So those issues that have to pretty much be all worked out as well. And those were things that were brought up back when we talked about joint law enforcement. I believe it was 2008.
So it's more than just there are different county commissioners now, but
Oh.
I understand what you're, thank you for
No,
the
and
background.
we
and
have
many
an excellent
issues.
relationship with our county
Yeah.
commissioners and the sheriff, best relations we've had in years. I think it's different than just could it happen.
Right.
It has to do with what are the specific needs of the city and economies of scale, what are the specific needs of the county.
And to that point, I think they got some other ideas as well, Brandy. Walter.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that we direct the staff to develop and prepare a public facilities bond election in May of 2018 to fund the siting and construction of a police facility on the site of the current Moscow Recycling Center, to redevelop the recycling center facility, repurposing of the current police facility to house the city's community development and engineering operations, and minimal renovations to the man building to house IS. And is HR a part of that, Gary?
That will be determined later.
And HR to be determined, and for use as a record storage facility.
Second.
Okay.
Lori, there was one change in the way it's written.
Did you get that whole thing, Lori?
With the edit.
With the edit, okay. Walter made a motion and Gina seconded it to direct staff to prepare for the public facilities for the bond reelection. And I'm not going to go into all the detail. Lori has got it. Any confusion with anybody on that? I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And aye.
Okay, staff, move forward with that.
Thank you very much.
And Gary gets item number 11, acknowledgement of the election results for this few weeks ago.
Well, this is the easiest agenda item tonight. We really don't have a lot to do. As you know, the city clerk used to run the city's elections. That's changed several years ago when the legislature delegated that job or directed that job is the county clerk's job. So city clerks assist, but the elections are done by the county. One of the things that we used to have to do back in the old days was when we ran an election, very quickly after the election, within the next couple days after the results were in and certified by the county clerk, we would have what was known as a canvassing meeting. And what would happen is you'd come in, we'd give you all the materials that we've given you in your packet today, election results by precinct with the successful candidates and the unsuccessful candidates, and you would canvass those, which merely says you look at them, find no irregularities, and vote for them. Since that time, canvassing is done by Latah County at this point, because it is run by the county clerk. However, Idaho Code still requires you to accept the canvassed election results. Seems a little bit redundant, but since it was a city election, the sitting legislative body has to canvass or at least accept the canvassed results from Latah County. So that's what you're being asked to do today.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we accept the canvass election results from Latah County.
A second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to accept the canvass election results from Latah County and start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay. We do not have, ladies and gentlemen, an executive session tonight, so I did not announce that earlier, but we do not have one. With that, I'd move on to reports, and I'll start with Jim.
Okay, Public Works Finance is pretty much covered in the regular agenda tonight. The other two reports I have are from Farmers Market Commission met last week and reported that they had a fabulous farmers market season as usual and one of the best in the United States and looking forward to doing that again next year. But what's going on this winter is a revision of the policy manual, which has gotten to be pretty much like the federal tax code. And so they're working very hard to streamline that and make it more understandable to the vendors. And so hopefully that will get done before May 1st. And they're also dealing with the new 3-tier fee structure and trying to make that as understandable as possible to the vendors. So that's what's going on at Farmers Market Commission. The Arts Commission are in the middle of their strategic planning process, and Jen Piffner's working on that, and they're moving along on that, and I think it'll be one of all the commissions, it'll be one of the most concise to do. Things that are going on here in the arts world, the 3rd Street Gallery right out here, starting December 1st, the Many Faces of Dance will be taking up the space here, and that'll go till January 29th, and then the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival will take up the gallery here. And then in May, there's going to be a tattoo art exhibit here, and the art walk will be on June 15th. That's going out far enough on the...
Gina wants a tattoo.
I'm all for that. That'd be awesome.
And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Walter.
The only thing I had was a Smart Transit Board meeting on November the 14th, and the main item of interest there was a presentation by Rebecca Couch, the head of U of I Parking Services, where she and Les have been in discussions about changing the one-way flow of traffic up toward the Commons building from the east side. They want to do it regardless, but if they do change it, in other words, instead of going clockwise and turn it counterclockwise, they might possibly be able to route both the east and west route transit buses up there and get them to have a stop closer to the Commons. It wouldn't go all the way to the Commons, but it would come closer. So that is in the works. There was a little bit of discussion among the board members as to whether or not they wanted to just go ahead and say, yeah, we'd do it, or they wanted to run a trial run to see what the demand was and could they meet their turnaround times or not. So,
okay.
That's all I got.
I went to the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department meeting, and they're working on the building. The 1954 addition has had huge masonry repair, over $57,000 that they're looking to have to do on the outside of the building. And they're also looking to rework the interior of Station 1 to better plan for space, offices, living quarters for the residents. This is for fire and ambulance offices and storage. And right now they sent out their brochure. They've raised $31,000 so far. There's 7 new members to the ambulance and the fire department. Jim's doing the stair climb. That's coming up on March 11th. They can take 9 people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
255 floors with a 40-pound pack every day. So we're going to win this thing.
Yep, so that's March 11th.
like fire.
There's 7 signed up, and they can take 2 more. It's $80 per person to do it. The first strategic planning was done by the board last Wednesday, which I think was led by our city supervisor, and they're working to, they're considering, retention and recruitment kind of things. And then they have and then the fire department awards banquet is December 2nd. That's coming up. Then Transportation Commission met, and exactly what Walter was talking about was presented to the Transportation Commission meeting about the rerouting of the streets, and Les did a presentation on that because of the city streets. And then I rode the bus with some people and asked them about it. They thought that was a great idea, and they were like, yeah, this is a great idea because it gets us closer into campus, closer to the commons. And then the traffic calming ideas were presented, and I brought 2 of the examples that Les had made for everyone at the Transportation Commission meeting, and then these are also available to any of the subcommittee members. So if anybody wants to see the corridor conceptual plans, they're here, and you can borrow them if you'd like or get some from him. The 10 members have met 2 times. We have 5 other meetings, and the 6th will be the presentation of the concept to the transportation, and then that process will begin there. And then I went to 1912's facility committee, and the sign is out. So Jenny said, please look for it. It is the design that the committee there said they like the best. So it'll say 1912 Center, 412 East 3rd Street. She said, please let us know if it's clear, if it's the right size. Can you see it from the street? Does it have a good representation of the building? And you can email her 1912center@gmail.com. She's still trying to raise $2 million for the 2nd floor. And the new roof is in process again because, remember, as council, we had said no to that last cost, but it's going to go out to rebid again in February to do the construction, hopefully in 2018. And that goes along exactly with what Gary was saying and the presentations that Les made, that all the construction costs are up because nobody's in town to do the work. So that's a lot of the problem. So that's all I have.
Okay. Gina?
Okay. Went to the Pathways Commission meeting. They're continuing to look for orphan paths. And they're also looking at some of the plans that are happening along A Street and that sort of thing, just to make sure that we're keeping in mind safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. So it's a nice function. The Sustainable Environment Commission, they are crafting, and Victoria, you get a lot of credit for this, sister, crafting a chapter of the comprehensive plan regarding climate change. And we had a really long discussion about that the other night. They're also working on
for it.
Excuse me?
Nothing.
Oh, they're also working on a proposal to pilot a pesticide-free park or parks. And both of these commissions, again, are working intercommissionally. So the Sustainable Environment is working with the Tree Commission and the Parks and Rec Commission to figure out ways to get these issues thoroughly dealt with. So it's kind of cool. We have a lot of cross-pollination. And then PBAC, right now we're trying to decide kind of the best way to go forward with the alternatives, how we get that out effectively, the alternative water supplies. And then we're also working on updating the website, which means about I don't know, 100, maybe 200 years, I'm exaggerating, of documents and documents and documents that used to be just little headings out on the website. So now we're trying to sort them and put them in a reasonable order, and so people can find them and things like that. So I'm glad that's not on my to-do list. But other than that, that's all we did.
Welcome, Brandy, and I know we threw you in the mix tonight, so you really don't have any.
Yeah, I don't have any reports.
Would you like to say anything?
Well, I would just say I know. Thank you for. I'm looking forward to working with everyone, and I've enjoyed sitting right here next to John for many years on the URA, and I will miss him, and I know you all will too, and I'm honored to be stepping in for him for the remainder of his term.
Awesome. With that, I have nothing. Gary, do you have something you want to add to us?
Yes, sir. As I indicated, we just submitted the CDBG grant for the fire engine last Friday, as Elisa reported, both at council and at committee, and at we had the public hearing at last committee for that even though the CDBG grant allowed a grant application up to $500,000, she consistently talks to the people at the Department of Commerce to determine what the competition level is. In other words, what competing projects are going in, and to determine whether or not you can become more competitive by not asking for the full amount, by adding additional match, by doing a bunch of different things. So after inquiry, she determined that there were going to be several water projects by communities that are currently under restriction in their water, so that's high priority for them. So there would be more competition for those funds. So at that time, we determined that the most viable application would be to request about a $302,000 grant, which would complement the amount of money we have accumulated in fleet for the purchase of the next fire truck. That additional match, as well as asking for less amount of money, should make us more competitive. And again, so that application went out on Friday, and we hope to hear back when they consider them in March, I believe, Walter, is it not?
Third week of January, you'll know if you make the short list.
Okay, cool. So we should know in 2 months.
Okay, and with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Adjourned at 9:30, folks. Thank you, everybody.